My name is Mary Gibble. My name is Mary Gibble, and I am the president and CEO of the Hancock County Community Foundation. And we're so happy that you could join us today to talk about an unprecedented opportunity in Hancock County. We want to make sure that we're going to have the biggest impact with the opportunity that has been presented before us. And let us just start out before we dive into that with a few housekeeping items. So if you would, please be sure that you're clearly identified in Zoom for the benefit of our presenters. The instructions for this are on the screen that you see.
Mary, you are muted.
All right, am I unmuted now?
Sorry, that was my fault. I muted everybody and forgot that was going to affect you.
All right, no worries, no worries. So just a few housekeeping items for our visitors today, and that is, please be sure that you are clearly identified in Zoom for the benefit of our presenters. Please include your first and last name and the organization that you are representing. We also ask that you please remain muted throughout the presentation unless you are invited to speak. This will help us eliminate background noise and other distractions. As you heard, there are over 70 people on the call. And then finally, we'll be utilizing the chat for all questions. We do have Marie online who will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure that all those questions are answered before the end of our session today. So be sure and do that. So finally, I want to now jump in and introduce you to our other speakers that you will be hearing from today. Katie Oninger from the Hancock County Community Foundation is our Community Investment and Grants Officer. Greg Garatas is with FSG Group. He represents our great Hancock County government. Scott Binke with Binke and Crawford Attorneys is also representing our county government. Deborah Carnes is on with us today. She is the Hancock County Auditor. If you email Katie with questions about ARPA, you will see Deborah is CC'd. That is for reporting purposes. The county does have to track all correspondence related to ARPA funds, which are federal funds. So there's all kinds of new things that we're going to learn on this journey, and we'll learn them together. We also have some additional staff helping us out today. I mentioned that Marie is online. That's Marie Felver, Vice President of Finance and Operations, who's doing the monitoring of the chat, as well as Carol Reynolds, our Finance and Program Administrative Associate, who's assisting with our visual presentation. So with that, let's jump right in. I'd like to start out by giving some background information on what ARPA is and how a grant opportunity for nonprofits came to be. On the screen is language from the U.S. Treasury for American Rescue Plan Act. That's what ARPA stands for. It is intended to provide needed relief to state, local, and tribal governments to enable them to continue to support the public health response and lay the foundation for a strong and equitable economic recovery from COVID. We want impact to be transformational. They want impact to be transformational. There were many facets of ARPA. The funding pool that we are talking about today is $3 million, and that is a portion of the $15 million that our county government received. The county commissioners allocated $3 million to go towards nonprofit work. Let's talk about roles and responsibilities. The Community Foundation is involved because the commissioners have acquired our services in the administration of these grants. I'd like to explain, using this diagram in front of you, how that's going to work. HCCF's role is in overseeing and administering the grant application, fielding questions from grant applicants. Your point of contact for these are always Katie Oninger. If she doesn't know the answer, Katie will find out, but she is the one who you should always contact first. We will be assisting in the review and in the decision-making process, and we'll be following up on grantee reporting and documentation. Later, Greg and Scott will talk about those details a little bit later. The county's role is to approve grant decisions, handling all the grant disbursements. If you receive a grant, The check is going to come from the county, not from the Hancock County Community Foundation. And the county's role is reporting back to the U.S. Treasury on the entire ARPA amount that they received, including these grants. Any questions on that so far? All right, we'll move right ahead. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie to talk about eligibility.
All right, thanks, Mary. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start with the basics here. What types of organizations may participate in this application process? So to be eligible, an organization must serve Hancock County. The organization does not necessarily need to be located in Hancock County, but all grant dollars must go toward work that directly impacts Hancock County. And please note that priority may be given to organizations that are headquartered here in Hancock County. Organizations must be a public tax exempt organization by section 501c3 of the IRS code. Other 501c organizations or mutual benefit organizations are not eligible. So no C6, C14, C19, nothing but a C3. However, organizations exempt from filing for 501c3 status are eligible. So these are units of government, schools, and religious organizations. So in summary, our eligible organizations need to be a 501c3 or equivalent that serves Hancock County. So on the next slide, these ARPA grants are going to support the following: current programming and capital improvement needs to serve clients and vulnerable populations, or new programming or capital ideas to address a community need. Those are the two areas that we are accepting LOIs for. So with the letter of intent, or LOI for short, the county commissioners are wanting to do a broad sweep to learn what needs and ideas are out there. So you are welcome to apply to support existing needs related to programming and capital improvement. So this would be your regularly scheduled programming that you do. If your LOI makes it to the next stage, you can include general operating funds in your project budgets. That would be salaries, etc., as long as the application centers around a program or capital project or need. And if anyone wants to drill down into that a little bit later, I would ask Greg and Scott to provide any more clarification on that.
Hey, Katie, real
Sure.
quick, can you go, Ginny Brown requested if you could go back one slide.
Okay. Yep, and information that you'll see in these slides, we are going to share this slide deck later this week, and also this information will be on our website as well.
Okay, thank you, she says.
All right. Okay. All right, so you are also able and even encouraged to submit an LOI for an idea. So the idea does not have to be fleshed out. At this point, you do not have to know the exact cost. You do not have to know contractors or collaborators. If you do know these things, you can absolutely include those details, but you do not need to know these things for the LOI stage. So please don't let the fact that you don't know all the details of how or even if it would work, do not let that stop you from submitting an idea that you may have. There is
Katie?
no, yep.
One comment. I noticed that you did hit correctly based upon the interim rule 501c3 only, but the final rule last week did expand it to 501c19s also.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's late breaking news. I don't mean to muddy the water, but it does say they expanded the rule for 501c3 organizations and 501c19 organizations.
Okay,
I just saw
that's
that
great.
today too.
Okay,
So-
thank you for that clarification. Some of this is becoming in hot and fast, so that's good. Thank you, Greg. Okay, back to specifics on the LOI. There is no limit on the number of LOIs that an organization could submit. So if you have 10 ideas you want to submit, you can go for it. I would just caution you to keep two things in mind before you may get carried away and fire off too many ideas in this process. The first one being your organization's capacity and what you can manage. If an LOI moves to the next stage, there will be an opportunity to request funds to increase capacity, but please just be mindful of scale and your organization's capacity. And the second one is sustainability of what you are proposing. We are not specifically asking about sustainability plans in the LOI, but that will most certainly be a conversation in the next stages. So really just have that in the back of your mind at this stage. Then there is also not a stated limit on the amount that you can request. 3 million is what is allocated. So a $10 million request wouldn't be a good fit, obviously. But if you want to submit a request for 10,000, go for it. If you want to submit a request for $500,000 or more, that is also welcomed. There is no minimum or maximum outside of the 3 million that's been allocated. So I'll pause there real quick and see if you have any questions, if you want to take a moment and put those in the chat and we can address those. Anything from Greg and Scott on what was presented before we take any questions or move on?
Greg covered one thing I did catch was the 501c19s, which is, you know, the armed forces. And that was in the final rule. And I just caught part of what Greg said because I've got a bad connection, but those organizations can also apply. And I think I heard you say we made that acknowledgement for our audience. So.
Great, thank you, Scott. Okay, I see one question. Oh,
Yeah, do you
okay.
see? Okay.
I do.
I'll
do.
Okay, I'll let you go ahead and maybe repeat the question, and then you can go ahead and answer it.
Sure, thanks, Marie. I see a question from Tamara. Is there a special form we need to fill out? And that is a great segue, Tamara, into my next slide. Yes, the letter of intent is actually not a letter in this case. We actually have 7 specific questions that we are going to ask to help you structure your proposal. And this is all going to be done in our online grant portal. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to walk through that for you. And right now, I'm really just going to cover the questions in detail. But yes, there is a form that you will need to submit for your proposal or proposals. The first question for the LOI is going to be asking you to tell us about your organization. So what is your mission? How many Hancock County residents do you serve in a given year? What are the general demographics of residents served? And Greg and Scott will discuss why this is important a little later. And then tell us how your organization is making our community a better place. Then the next question is give your request a title in 10 words or less. So this is how your request will be identified in our system at each stage of the process. So please make sure your title is clear and gives a pretty good idea of what your request is about. Question 3, we will ask you to identify an expenditure category for your request. The U.S. Treasury has laid out an extensive list of categories, and there is a link in the LOI that will take you to the full list of categories so you can review them. So we will ask you to please select the one that you think fits best. So for example, if you're a food pantry, you're likely going to select 2.1 household assistance food programs. If you provide addiction services, you're likely going to select 1.11 substance use services. On the screen, you're just seeing a snapshot of the categories available. There are several more, and that link will take you to the extensive list. And one note I'll have here is I ask you to please not stress about this question. Really just want you to choose the one that you think is best. In the next stages, if the proposal moves forward, if we need to adjust the category you choose, we can do that. This is really just the starting point for us. So question 4, what is the funding need you anticipate for this proposal? So we're going to ask you to select one of these ranges that best matches the approximate financial resources needed to accomplish your proposed project or vision. We are not at this stage asking for an exact amount here. We are really just looking for a ballpark. This will help us see the scale of the requests that come in so we can best structure how to move forward. Question 5, the concept summary. This question is the meat of the LOI. So this is the T-bone steak of your LOI. This is where you will provide a narrative summarizing the purpose of your project, program, or idea. So this should include what would be accomplished, how does this align with your organization's mission, and how would Hancock County benefit? How would this meet a community need? So you're going to have up to 10,000 characters in the LOI to answer this specific question. So you can include just about as much information as you'd like here. Then question 6, we're going to ask us to tell you about the expertise of staff or volunteer support you have to accomplish this. So how does the expertise and capacity of your staff and or volunteers position your organization to carry out your mission, relevant programs, and this grant request? And finally, question 7. Here's where you can share what other organizations would be collaborators on this project. This is the only optional question on the LOI. If your request is solely something your organization would do solo, you can skip this question. However, if you know or anticipate others would be involved, please list them here. You don't necessarily have to have approached them or asked them if they're interested at this point. So if your idea is very much just an idea, put down who you think would want to be involved. It's okay if you haven't approached them. So if your LOI moves on in the process, we'll address collaborations in the next stage. So I will pause there and ask if there are any questions about the questions.
Katie, there was one question that came in that says, if we are a grant recipient from HCCF in 2022 already, does this exempt us from applying?
No, it does not.
Okay, great. And another question, can staff be paid out of this grant?
If you do receive a grant, as long as the proposal is centered around those two areas, either a current project, programming or capital need, or an idea, as long as the operating requests support that bigger purpose, then yes, you would have an opportunity to write that into your budget in the next stage. We do not need to know all that information in the LOI.
Okay, and then someone also asked about sharing the PowerPoint, and we will share the PowerPoint with all of you after this presentation.
Yes. Okay, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward. So all LOIs will need to be submitted by March 1st, 2022 at noon. No late submissions are going to be accepted. This is a hard deadline. So that means 12:01 is too late. Our system will shut down the LOI at noon. So I really highly encourage you not to wait until the last minute. You never know, you may have an internet trouble or something unexpected may come up. So just please make sure you give yourself enough cushion so that if we need to help you, we have the time to do that before the system shuts down. So I've already had some questions about what the next steps in the process will be. So I just want to outline here kind of what we know and what we don't know at this point. So what I can tell you that we know is that there will be a next stage after the LOI. We do not have the specifics of what that will look like yet. This is a unique grant cycle in that the scale of requests coming in will likely be extremely different. The application process can and should look different for a $10,000 request than it does for a $250,000 request. So we are waiting to see the scale of requests that come in before we map out specific next steps. We anticipate that for projects larger in scale, that HCCF will play a role in convening relevant parties to have conversations about how to work together to accomplish something on a large scale and how to put together a strong, comprehensive application. So these conversations will need to flesh out project lead, capacity, sustainability, et cetera. And again, that would happen in the next stage. So with that in mind, we can say at this point, we do not yet know specifically what the application questions will be, when the application deadline will be, and if there will be any additional application rounds. I can tell you the HCCF and the county are committed to an equitable and effective application process. We are building in flexibility to allow us to respond to the scale and types of requests that come in appropriately. So I'll pause and see if anything else has come in as far as questions.
All right, I have a question for you, Katie.
Okay.
Does the grant request have to go towards a COVID-related project, or can it be for anything that benefits the community?
I may, if I can, toss that to Greg.
Yeah, Katie, the Treasury is real interested in having the dollars applied to areas which was disproportionately impacted by COVID or the pandemic, or both, as you might call them. If it's a project in general, okay, and it comes under improving the life of, let's say, kids in Hancock County, and giving them more access to either good quality food, good quality, athletic type of thing, giving them a walking trail, giving them something like that. It will take more support, but it is possible that it will fall under a different category. So improving the life or the health of people in the future here is a separate category. It's great if it's a lower income, if it's a disproportionate group, that scores more points, but I'm not saying it can't be done with the other project. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Another question, when would we be notified if we make it past the LOI stage?
We have said it would be spring of 2022.
Okay, that is all the questions we have right now in the chat.
Okay, great. So I think for this next part, I'm going to hand it over to Greg and Scott to kind of talk more in detail about U.S. Treasury guidelines and particulars.
Sure, and Katie and Mary and the whole HCCF group, thank you very much. You've done a lot of hard work getting us to this point. And welcome and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Greg Garatas. Unfortunately, I'm going to be the boring CPA kind of part of this group, and then Scott's going to kind of fill in the blank and jump in at any time, Scott, if you'd want to. But I think Hancock County has an awesome opportunity given to us by the county council, county commissioners, and the auditor's office to establish or take some of these funds and establish a program maybe, or a way to fund some programs that may be impactful to Hancock County now and in the future. That is really something that that Treasury talks about throughout their 437-page interim and now final rule. That's even that's really hard to read, but lot of information there, and we'd give you the whole rule if you're really bored to death and want to look at it. The point is that we have some money that maybe we can benefit the not-for-profit area and organizations that fall under 501c19. But Treasury does say that they really want to make an impact if your organization, and you can move to the next slide if you want to, if your organization impacts specific, and we're looking at this demographic now area, and if you're specifically impacting certain groups in Hancock County that, again, I will say this numerous times, disproportionately got affected by COVID or the pandemic. And if you have a lower income group that you serve, and lower income, I actually did run something, and I don't know if I have that printed out, but there's some definitions in there that we'll have to comply with 185% and 300%, but I actually had it already printed out and already calculated. I just don't have it at my fingertips. But if your organization services those, if your organization services persons over 65, and as you can see, we put up 3 counties here, kind of 3 of them that we've been working with and stuff like that. So, this comes from one of the demographic websites. If you can justify in your LOI that you have a high percentage of individuals in this category, one of these categories, please point that out, because this will end up to be ultimately a point scoring process to a certain degree to make sure that we must and have to comply with the Treasury's final rules. And so that's very, very important. And we shared this information here, and you can have subsets. That's not a problem. Scott, anything you'd like to comment on this slide?
Thanks, Greg. I apologize because I've got a bad connection and I keep going in and out here, but I heard part of what you said. I know you went through some of these demographics, and I think you may have already touched on the idea that these funds are available where there's been a negative economic impact or disproportionate impact on certain households who, have demographics that support that in terms of low income housing and those kinds of issues. So there are the final rule does apply to that, does talk and speak to that. So Greg is correct. That's information that the Board of Commissioners is definitely going to want. And in terms of trying to evaluate all the respective requests, that's going to be taken into consideration because these funds are designed to help those who are more in need in terms of the impact that the virus has had, which is obviously very complex. So also, I would just add one other thing. While the commissioners are looking for projects that have behavioral, potentially mental health and behavioral, components to them, because we've recognized and commissioners recognize the need for that. There's also the provisions within the rule that speak to nonprofits being adversely impacted themselves in terms of donations and those types of things. So that's not something that's being emphasized. I mean, we're looking to better the county in terms of some of the deficiencies and some of the things that have happened, voids that have been created by this pandemic, but that's also covered in the final rule. So this information is important for you to include in your letter of intent, potentially the application as we go forward.
Great. I'm going to jump in with a couple questions that have come in. I've got 2 here. Greg or Katie, you've referenced points and a scoring process. Do you have a final rubric that you will be using that will be shared before the LOI process closes?
And thank you. I saw that. And just obviously we do not, because we don't even have the proposals. But where I was coming from is that we will give feedback to the HCCF and say this line, and this line, or this part of the project really falls in the intent of the 437 pages. And so that's what I meant by a score or a process. So we will make that transition given or assignment given the project that is talked about or discussed.
Okay.
Katie, you want to fill in?
I do not have any details to include there. I do see a kind of a question that dovetails into that. Who is reviewing the LOI? The county commissioners will be the ones with the ultimate review. HCCF has also offered our insights into the nonprofit communities and our community as well to assist them in that effort.
There's one more question that just came in. Would you need copies of licenses of everyone visiting our food pantry in order to prove age, or just information we gather as part of an informal survey?
So there's no written rule on that. I think as long as so I'm going to say, no, we don't need a copy of everybody's license. I'm going to say.
I would agree with that, Greg.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to say if there's a sample, if there's a certification, if there's something that we can have, as you know, the CPA always talks about auditable evidence.
Yeah.
So if we can have some kind of auditable evidence that you can show that, you know, you've done random samples, you've done whatever, and that X amount percentage of your food pantry is served or is served by this demographics, that's perfect. Remember, but again, when I talked about kind of scoring points, having safe, quality, healthy food for individuals is something they really want to see. And so.
This is Debbie Carnes. Could I weigh in for just a second? Absolutely.
You're the boss.
I just want to agree with what Greg says. Any supporting documentation that you're able to provide it is basically a requirement. You don't have to have their licenses, but supporting documentation of what you're telling us is, you know, we're going to require that in order to meet the stipulations that are placed upon us when we're distributing those funds. So I would just kind of keep that in mind when you're submitting. Once you've received your grant approval, you submit your supporting documentation with it. And then I also wanted to go back on that final rule, and I'm sorry guys, we keep talking about this. It is kind of a hot topic. It just came out, but something else is, I think Greg, you might have seen this too. The threshold for household income below like $60-some thousand is a good demographic. That they pretty much said that if that household income is around $60,000, that would be a key, I guess not requirement, but a key factor. That's all I have.
Absolutely did see that, but the only qualification I would put there is actually Treasury was very innovative, and if your household happens to be of 6 people, that goes up considerably.
Okay.
So there's actually a tiered system, but so again, in the LOI, just tell us. We'll probably have to drill down to that detail as we get further along, Katie.
But let me just add one thing to what Deborah said. We would prefer, if you have a question or in doubt about what you should include and the detail you need to include, go ahead and err on the side of caution and include it, because the more we can substantiate what your request is and how you're supporting it, the more likely it is that it can be approved. And also from an auditing standpoint for the auditor, she's got to account for, you know, how these funds are expended. And we'll get into that later in terms of quarterly reports and annual report and those kind of things and the time period that's involved. But if it's better to over substantiate as opposed to under. So I would just use that as your principal guide.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I have a couple other questions here that have come in. One, looking for clarification. Does this particular slide mean that preference will be given to organizations that are serving minorities?
Oh, I'm not going to speak for the commissioners. You know, propose your LOI.
Yeah, I would add to that, Greg. The commissioners, you know, they've got to see what comes in. And I don't think that we can predict, or is it right to say, well, this will be the preference, because I don't think that will be borne out until they have an opportunity to review everybody's applications and see what's there. I mean, we all know that the Treasury's provide some guidance on this, and low income households are, obviously part of that equation, and as Deborah just pointed out, in terms of what they're looking for. So that's important. But again, I don't think that anybody would be excluded or included necessarily based on one factor alone like that.
And Katie, I have the entire matrix for the state of Indiana on low income and high and moderate income and all that. We can give you for Hancock County the strip of that. But I mean, I really don't want to confuse the issue too much, because there's a 2-tiered test, the 185 and the 300. And again, it's based upon the household size. So let's get our LOIs in and let's dust those off, and let's make Hancock County better.
I like it. One more question, Katie, that you may want to, I know you're going to hit on this a little bit later, but see if you have anything else to add right now. This process sounds like it's going to be very different from previous HCCF grants. That is true. Will there be any sample LOI letters we can look at?
Yeah, and I might just clarify some wording that this is not an HCCF grant. I would kind of look back to those roles and the differentiation between what we are doing and the county's role. Our role is really just in helping in the administration of the application process. We are helping structure the LOI and the application through our online grant portal. And then we will assist the county in receiving those and reviewing those. But the funds are coming from the federal government and running through the county commissioners. So I know that's kind of difficult to maybe understand. This is very different, but I just wanted to make that clarification. We do not have any sample LOIs. I would be really hesitant to create one because the types of requests can be so broad, and I certainly wouldn't want to create something that someone might read and say, oh, well, if it needs to be like that, then I don't want to submit mine. So the purpose of today is really just to kind of walk through all those questions, the 7 questions that I walked through, and asking Greg and Scott to provide some clarification on kind of what the U.S. Treasury has stated, to give the best idea that we can of what is eligible and what the commissioners are looking for. So I hope that's helpful.
That's all.
Yeah, I would just add one thing. If you address those 7 questions and you do it in a letter format, that's going to be sufficient. The real issue is whether you got to provide enough detail on those 7 questions. So the actual format of it isn't as critical as just making sure that you address those in a letter form. That's it. Then the application process is going to be more detailed. So.
Do we want to move on to the next slide? So this was just the census tract, but if you looked at, and again, you can boil it down to a certain census tract that has low to moderate income or anything like that, please do. It's a little hard to find some of those in these broader census tracts in Hancock County. And in some of the other counties, you really had to boil it down to other areas. So that may be required. Next one. So this is the general categories. Now, Treasury has even boiled it down to 4 categories within these items here, but these line up to the big matrix that you saw Katie present earlier, which is actually from the portal that we have to upload when we spend money, or when you spend the money, grant money, we have to load it up into those categories. And so that's why Katie asked you if you could take a look at those categories could change on us between now and we really haven't spent too much money. We'll have to make our first report at the end of January here, but next year we'll have to really make them fit in. So we really have to have your advice or what you think they're going to fall under. Again, these are broken down in that big matrix. On the next one, then, there isn't, we're not trying to make this program hard, but the State Board of Accounts has said, and on the premium pay, you don't have to worry about that. That was specific to, that's not specific to the not-for-profit.
Yeah,
That was specific to the county. Those were. So we do have internal
that's
controls.
specific to county.
Yeah, we do have internal controls,
ahead.
and we're going to have to know exactly how you spend the dollars. So when you spend the dollars, we'll ask for a canceled check and an invoice for everything that you do, either capital or non-capital. And so you will be, as we go through this, and once we apply we have the application stage, we will have to go through each internal control with you and make sure it's covered for whatever you're proposing. So if you were to purchase food in the example for the food bank, we would need a printed receipt and a check and auditable evidence that'll have to be uploaded to the county so that the county auditor, this came from my presentation, protecting the county auditor, that's what this is all about. We've got to make sure she has to apply these rules and make sure she's covered. So this was just the broad concept, but obviously checks and invoices will be required. Next slide. So grant dollars are generally need to be spent within 12 months. We do have to make reports to the federal government on their portal on all of the grants and or basically money that's spent. Okay, we are saying that if your project would take a little bit more, capital project would take a little more than 12 months, please explain that in your LOI. It won't throw you out, but we are under a very strict deadline to have these funds spent by Treasury in a certain amount of time. So we're, again, not trying to make it hard, but trying to work with you and make sure that we qualify when we're all said and done. And the county, by the way, the ultimate Treasury has said that if this is violated, anything's violated along the way, the county government will be required to pay it back. So it's very, very important that we do follow the timelines and the guidance.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Greg, if there's a violation, they send out a notice and then we have a right to reconsider. But you're correct. The bottom line is the county has some exposure there. And so that's why we have these checks and balances and why we're asking you to be very detailed in what you provide, because the county doesn't want to run afoul of the Treasury coming back and asking to recoup money that we've given out. That's a disaster. So that kind of goes with what we were saying earlier about being more detailed than less.
And I did see the question, if you don't mind, Katie, I'll just address it. We are hoping, we put in here 12 months from the grant award date. We figured there might be a little planning process that has to be in front of it. So I'm thinking out loud, not seeing the project, that we could make that with the 12 months from the grant award date as we put here.
Yeah, and Greg, would it be fair to estimate that we may be making grants in the summer, maybe late summer?
I would say that's great, Katie. I think so, unless there's a special situation, and those will have to be on a one-off.
There's one more
Again.
question that just came in.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Greg. I didn't mean to. stop
Again,
talking.
if there's something that is really great for Hancock County, really means something for the future, that's probably something we could give you an extra few months on.
Yeah, and I think we have specified that that 12 months is going to be our kind of our standard that we're looking for. But again, with just the potential for varying scales of projects, we certainly want to build in some flexibility if it's needed. If there's a very large scale capital project, for instance, where it would be very difficult to execute that in 12 months, we would certainly want to be flexible on that if we can, obviously within the U.S. Treasury's guidelines.
Next
One
slide.
thing to add, just one thing, the question regarding the granting happening in late summer, that would be preferred on the commissioner's plate with all the development that's occurring and the new jail. That may or may not happen. I did see a response saying, hey, that's great, but I don't want us to get it done. But I think it's possible it won't be. That's something I would just add that.
Okay, one other question, two more questions. Everybody's got questions, which we expected. Can organizations collaborate?
Absolutely. Yes, and
that?
that's actually one of the questions in the LOI is asking who you anticipate would be a collaborator on the project, if there would be any. Obviously, there would need to be one organization who would be kind of that fiscal sponsor who would manage the grant funds and be the one responsible for the reporting back and making sure the funds were executed in the way that they said they were going to be. But absolutely, if there's a big scale project where multiple organizations are involved to get it done, we certainly welcome and encourage that.
Okay, and another question. So if I understood correctly, funds are dispersed upfront when the award is designated, and this is not a reimbursable grant award process. Is that correct?
I'm going to say no, that's not correct. We are not going to give 25,000 upfront and say good luck, because this has to be spent within a certain period of time. So the anticipation is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, but I believe what we were anticipating is that either the invoices would be either reimbursed or paid.
That's my understanding, and that's a conversation that we really haven't ironed out yet. But I know State Board of Accounts has said that us just giving lump sums of money up front is not ideal or anything that they think that they could be behind.
Because we have to make certain it is spent within a limited amount of time. And so that'll be the key.
And then a follow-up comment to that is just concern with cash flow for smaller nonprofits.
We'll work with you in any way, shape, or form we can, because we don't want, small is always good. And again, if it's an impactful project, we'll just have to work with you.
Can I just add, a lot of the reporting is going to be coming through my office, and a lot of the claims that all of the claims that you'll be submitting will be coming through my office. If at any time anyone has a question throughout that process, and obviously we're not there yet, you're more than welcome to give me a call. I mean, we're all in this together, and we really want to help, like Greg said, Hancock County be better. So it's just unfortunate that we have so many stipulations placed upon us for it, but we want to work with you and that money's here to be given to help us all out. So don't ever hesitate to give me a call when we're at that point.
Okay, and one other question, will the ARPA grant allow for faith-based organizations to bid or apply for funding?
Yes, the answer is yes. And the way we structured the eligibility language for that is very, very similar to what you're used to with typical HCCF grants, in that, yes, churches and religious organizations are welcome to apply. However, proselytizing is the word that we used. Any programs or projects that are strictly proselytizing in nature are not something that would be funded for this process. It would be something that needs to have a broader a community impact.
Okay.
I'm going to jump in here real quick and just say that for me, for the Community Foundation, this is the first that I have heard that an outlay of cash will be required by the nonprofits that are applying for these funds, with the expectation that there'd be, first the expenditure and then a reimbursement based on the expenditures that they've made. So I would like to make sure that we flesh that out a little further before we kind of think through that in stone. Katie and I will definitely need to follow back up with Deborah and Greg and Scott on that to make sure that, that's absolutely the way it's going to be. So before we say that's the way it's going to be, before that's the hard line, let us kind of circle back with each other. Again, this has been the U.S. Treasury's kind of been, we have to remain patient as the updates come out, as all parties involved, including us and our county partners, navigate new territory. So let us double check on that and get back with you with an exact answer.
And Mary, we may not have an exact answer. So I guess what I'd like to do too in the LOI, if you can point to where the cash flow difficulty is. I mean, because this isn't going to be a Treasury issue. This is going to be a State Board of Accounts issue. And so we can ask direct questions of the State Board of Accounts.
Okay.
And so if there's, I need to buy, I'm going to buy $25,000 worth of food for this to implement the food program. Could we directly pay that invoice? We can get some guidance and work that out before we sign the grant award, basically. So I guess I need to hear what your difficulty is within your project. And then maybe we need, Deb and I and a few of us will set up a half-an-hour phone call with State Board of Accounts and get some better answers, because they have none at this point in time. Remember, they're going to also approach this. There's not a lot of counties. There was a special exception that came out last week, and a lot of counties don't have to do anything. And so now counties over a certain level have the opportunity, and Hancock County has chosen this opportunity. So we are writing the book on this from scratch. So tell me what your cash flow difficulty is. We'll try and knock that. I like to say Financial Solutions is our middle name. We'll find the solution, and we'll try and get an answer from the State Board of Accounts to protect the county.
That's great, Greg. Thank you so much.
Marie, if I may hop in real quick, I saw that Sandy had a question if there were any other caveats for faith-based organizations. I just included the language that we have put out there for ineligible organizations or activities that should answer that question. But I would certainly pass it to Greg or Scott if there is anything above or beyond that you want to point out.
Nothing comes to my mind at this point.
No, I think that language covers it. If they just review that, they can make that determination.
Okay, and then there's just been a few other comments about figuring out this reimbursement piece as timely as we can, and we certainly will do that and follow back up. Okay, Greg, you ready to move on to your next slide?
Absolutely.
That actually may
It's not
be-
mine. I was going to say it's not mine.
Yeah, I think we're moving on to me now. So real quick, I want to take some time just to run through our online grant portal. As I mentioned, each stage of the application process is going to run through our online grant portal, which you see on the screen. So you'll start here with the LOI. We are going to follow up with an email that we said is going to include a lot of things, and that will include a direct link to this grant portal. You can also access it from the nonprofit page of the HCCF website, which is www.givehcgrowhc.org. And Marie, I may ask you to put that in the chat real quick if you could, so everyone can have access to that. So what you're seeing on the screen is our login page. If you've submitted an application with us before, you will simply log in with the credentials that you've created. If you have not used the system before, I would encourage you to watch the short tutorial video that is linked on this page, and that will walk you through setting up an account. And then you will click the Create New Account button here to get started. I will note that if you're not sure if your organization already has an account in our online grant portal, or if you do not have login for it, please contact us before setting up an account, and we'll make sure we get you up and running. So once you are logged in, you will be taken to your applicant dashboard on the next slide. That's going to look like this. On the applicant dashboard, you should see your contact information at the top. And then below that, you can access any active or historical grant requests that you have through HCCF. And if you personally have not used the system before, you're not going to see anything there. Then to access the ARPA LOI, you will click the Apply button at the top of the page. And in this screenshot, it's circled in red at the top. From the Apply page, you will see the ARPA process below. I ask you to please read the information on this page before you get started. There's a lot of information there. And then when you're ready to start, please press the blue Apply button. And then it didn't quite fit in the screen capture, but there is also a preview button where you can see all of the LOI questions before you actually hit Apply to get started. And that will be in the bottom left of the screen. You can see I've got it kind of circled there so you can see what it looks like. Then on this slide, this is the LOI, which is what you will see after you click that blue Apply button. One other thing I want to direct your attention to is that you'll notice there's a Collaborate button at the top right. So if you need someone else to help you fill out this LOI, this is where you will go for that. And if you need additional help with that, please contact us. The way our system is set up is that within an organization, each LOI is going to be tied to one person within that organization. So if you have a colleague or another volunteer that you need to help with that, the Collaborate button is where you'll go to do that. And again, please ask us if you need any help with that. So once you complete all the questions and everything is just as you want it, you will click the blue Submit LOI button at the bottom right. And then once you do that, this is the confirmation screen you will see. And when you see this, you'll know that your LOI has been successfully submitted. Then this is an example of the confirmation email you will also receive once your LOI is submitted. And one thing I encourage you to do is to go into your email system and whitelist this email address that you can see on the screen in red, administrator@grantinterface.com. This is the email that automated correspondence from our grant portal will come from. So you want to make sure those emails don't go into your spam folder, that you're getting those emails directly. And then when you go back to your applicant dashboard, you will see that the ARPA LOI is now under your active requests tab. And from here, you can view the LOI. I will note that you cannot edit it after you have hit submit, but you can view it. So make sure that once you hit submit, you are really ready for it to be submitted. Then if you receive an invitation to submit a full proposal, this is where you will access that. And if you have any questions or run into any challenges with our online system, I can't stress this enough, please don't hesitate to contact us. I really don't want you to spend a lot of time beating your head against the wall if you've run into an obstacle or you're not sure what to do next. Let's please mitigate the time that you're spending on this by letting us help if we can. So I'll just pause there and ask if there are any questions on the online system. Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and move on just to keep us moving. So I'm going to completely switch gears here. And just while I have you all, I wanted to just talk about some 2022 HCCF grant opportunities. These, with the exception of one, are grant opportunities that run through HCCF that are our dollars. So first, 2022 is a very special year for us. It's our 30th anniversary. So we've got a special grant cycle to kind of celebrate that, and our way to really say thank you to our nonprofits through grant dollars. So these grants are going to be administered on a rolling basis, beginning in May of this year through the end of November, or until our funds are depleted. So that means the application is going to stay open during that time for you to access when you want or need to submit a request. And then I could say just kind of on our end, just so you know, on the fourth Wednesday of May, July, September, and November, we will begin reviewing the applications that were received in that 2-month time period. So we're going to plan to cut checks 4 times during this grant cycle. And I've sent out more information through Nonprofit News, and it's on our website about this grant cycle. It's going to have a maximum of $5,000 per request. Organizations may only submit 1 application in this 30th anniversary grant cycle for project and program support or capital improvement. So that is how that 30th anniversary grant cycle is going to work. Moving along to match day. HCCF is planning a match day in 2022. It's been a while since we've done that, so we're excited to offer this opportunity again. This is really a special opportunity when we will match donor gifts to participating organizations' endowment funds at HCCF within a defined time period. To be eligible to participate in match day, organizations must have an endowment fund at HCCF that the nonprofit itself established to support its Hancock County operations. The endowment fund must have been established on or before December 31st of 2021, and the fund's balance must currently be less than $500,000. We have already communicated with eligible organizations. So if you are eligible, you have received an email from me. And this, then just so you know, the matching opportunity will be available for 30 hours. We've got a 30 theme going here, beginning at 4 p.m. on September 30th and ending at 10 p.m. on October 1st. So we really do a lot of pomp and circumstance around this. So you'll see a lot of information coming out about that. So more to come. And moving along, the White family process remains pretty much the same, except that they have committed to grant a total of $30,000 this year in celebration of the anniversary. Just a reminder, eligible projects for that may include, but are not limited to, beautification projects, building facade improvements, recreational enhancements and accessibility, public safety, and transportation. And they're really looking for applicants that serve Shirley, Indiana, and nearby surrounding communities. The Ignite Grants program engages Hancock County's municipalities and civic organizations in a placemaking grant process. So these grants support community-driven projects and quick win transformations that foster connection to place, enhance community vibrancy, advance physical and social outcomes, and promote a creative identity. So in 2022, our Celebrating Communities partners, which again are those municipalities and service civic organizations, are invited to apply for an Ignite grant of up to $25,000. So we'll be working with those invited organizations in the next several months. In mini grants, I know many of you are very familiar with how these work. These are administered on a rolling cycle each calendar year. Applications are accepted and evaluated on a first come, first served basis until the available funds for the calendar year are gone. These really focus in on requests that are for one-time immediate expenses of $1,000 or less. So these are really kind of like a safety net funds. We want you to know that these are here if you have a need that comes up. And we want to be able to execute these dollars quickly to help with those immediate needs. So if your organization is interested in applying, please contact me directly to discuss a potential proposal. In our animal welfare grant cycle, this is another invitation-only grant opportunity open to Frenzy Animal Rescue, Greenfield Hancock Animal Management, Hancock County Humane Society, and PAWS. Just a little background, HCCF administers 3 donor-established funds that are dedicated to supporting animal welfare in Hancock County. So that is why we have a special grant cycle for those organizations. The Martha Beckenholt Youth Philanthropy Award is named in honor of longtime Hancock County resident and philanthropist Martha Beckenholt. It recognizes a Hancock County high school junior who has contributed outstanding time, talent, and energy to philanthropic endeavors. So the award recipient will select a Hancock County nonprofit organization to receive a $1,000 donation in his or her name, and that's donated by HCCF. So if you have any young volunteers who are high school juniors who are just awesome, please encourage them to apply for this. It's a really fun award process that we get to do, and just very warm and fuzzy, makes you very excited about the future with all these great kids that we have. And then finally, I just want to give a quick plug for the Wortman Family Foundation grants. This is a new grant cycle that is being administered by the Blue River Community Foundation in Shelbyville. So funding from the Wortman Family Foundation will focus on the community needs of both Shelby and Hancock counties. They're looking for activities that better the 2 counties through community enhancement projects in the areas of art, recreation, and beautification. Efforts and initiatives in education and health are preferred, and requests benefiting the Morristown community are priority. But again, it's open to Hancock County organizations. Grant proposals may range between $2,500 and $25,000. Grant interest forms are due by January 28th. So if you're interested in getting in on that, you'll want to do that here pretty quickly. And then the next stage grant applications are going to be submitted by February 28th. So Mr. Bob Wortman has a board of advisors with Blue River Community Foundation. They're going to evaluate requests and announce grantees in late March or early April. And I can assure you that there is great Hancock County representation on that board of advisors. So there's definitely going to be an advocate or 2 there. So if you're interested in learning more about that one, direct you to the Blue River Community Foundation's website to access that grant interest form. Okay. So I know we've answered a lot of questions already, but I just want to pause again. Pause, dog pause. Okay. So many puns. All right. And just see if there are any more questions. Anything else has occurred to you throughout this presentation that we can get answered for you today. And if it's easier, I don't see anything in the chat. Maria, I don't think you've brought up anything or seen anything.
There's a question that just did come up.
Okay.
Or more comment. For what it's worth, this is from Ann Miller. I was able to confirm that Hamilton County is distributing ARPA funds in full next week. No reimbursement process will be utilized, although surely reporting will be required. That's much less cumbersome for all parties involved, obviously. Maybe Hancock County has chosen a different ARPA path, just FYI as you research the details on this issue.
Okay.
And
That's great.
there are different paths and different monies. So we can sure check into that.
Yes, thank you, Anne. If anybody else has questions, feel free to type them in. And Carol has added a link directly to Blue River Community Foundation's website. If you're interested in applying for the Wortman Family Grants, you'll find the application through that link. Thank you, Carol.
And if it's easier than typing, we've got a few minutes left. If it's easier to go off mute and ask a question verbally, I'd welcome you to do that as well. Okay, going once. Going
Well,
twice.
well, you guys are. before Katie
Just
gets
want
to,
to say thank you for the great information, and
great.
it's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
Yes, and I just want to thank Katie for putting together such a great presentation as well on behalf of the Community Foundation. I want to thank Greg and Scott for being here today to help us with some of the more technical questions when it comes to this. And Deborah, thank you as well. And the team in the background who's monitoring the situation and recording this, thank you very much. The Community Foundation is truly honored to be a part of this conversation. We so appreciate that the county commissioners have considered us as their partner in helping administer this once in a lifetime opportunity. We are here to advocate on your behalf, to answer questions that we have. We understand that we have a little bit of new news that we weren't quite expecting. We'll navigate that and get answers back to you as quickly as we possibly can. So thank you for your patience on that. And thank you so much for your time today.
Mary?
Yes.
Hey, this is Keely Buttram. Do you have just a moment?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to let everybody know, in terms of the cash flow piece, don't hesitate or start altering your brainstorming sessions based on the lack of information still about the cash flow. I think that elected officials well understand that if you had the cash, you would be doing whatever it is you're going to be asking about already, and that in most cases there will not be cash to front from the organization. So we do need to hash out kind of what that process is going to look like, but don't throw out or scale down an idea based on the thought that you would have to cash flow it up front.
Thank you, Keely. And you're speaking with which hat on? Do you want to make sure that our audience understands who they're talking?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm county counsel at large, and I am on the ARP committee with Jim Shelby and John Jessup. And I've talked with them many times, and they've reiterated many times that their highest level of interest is in doing projects. I'm sorry, I just realized my video is off. Is in accomplishing big ideas that could otherwise not be attained, that this seed funding would create something that otherwise can't exist. And so obviously you don't have the money to do it, or you would have done it already. And they want to entertain all of those ideas. It's in most cases, you are not going to have the money to do your idea. We will navigate that piece.
Very good. Thank you, Keely.
Hey, Mary or Greg or Scott, any other final words before we log off?
No, just, again, it's a great opportunity given to us by the council and the commissioners and the auditor's office. We're writing the book as we go. Treasury did, I will say, I even looked at the final rule. They even said on average a not-for-profit would be lucky if they had 6 months of cash. So I want to reiterate what I said and what Keely said. Please just tell us what you're trying to achieve, and let us knock down the walls for you and with you. That's
Yeah, I
it.
would just add to that too. We don't want that issue to have a chilling effect on those of you that wish to apply. And Keely's point is well taken, because there's some logistics we still have to work through, as we said, with the State Board of Accounts, as Greg and Deborah both said. So we'll get that done. I mean, the whole idea is to have great projects that have a positive impact on the community. So, I think it's helpful for you to point that out. So now we'll have to address it.
Very good.
Great.
We're all in this together.
That's right. Well, Mary, if I can offer a last word, I just want to say I know it's been a really difficult 2 years, particularly for all of you working so hard in the nonprofit sector. And these dollars are just an amazing opportunity for us to bounce back stronger. I'm just looking at the screen here, we have such a vibrant community of nonprofit leaders who are more than capable of doing really big and wonderful things with these funds. And we look forward to walking this journey with you. And just want to reiterate again, please, any questions or anything we can do to help, please reach out. We'll follow up with information. And just want to say thank you so much again, and please stay safe out there. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.